Hello gainers, Ralphie here with some fitter philosophy, sharing some philosophy, my personal philosophy, which I've actually learned from many people over the years. Sometimes I've learned it from the traditional classic philosophers like Socrates and Aristotle, and often I've actually learned a lot of philosophy from ordinary people around me who unwittingly and unexpectedly just dropped a bit of philosophy into the social conversation or the event that I was involved in, whether sitting having a cup of coffee or going for a walk with someone or whatever. And basically all these little philosophies have added up to improve and empower my quality of life, and the purpose of life is to live it, to experience it. That, gainers, is the purpose of life. And one of the ways we can improve our quality of life and what we get out of life is to be mindful and thoughtful and stoic. And part of stoicism is to address and challenge the norms, and to explain to ourselves why we should conform on some occasions to the norms, what's normal and social and acceptable, and on other occasions why we shouldn't. In other words, why we should sometimes fit in with what's happening around us, and sometimes we should not fit in with what's happening around us, and importantly, to know the difference and to apply the alternative as and when necessary. My last vlog was on the subject of not being lonely on your own, because when we are lonely in our own company, when there's not other people around us, it's our subconscious telling us something important, that we are disconnected from ourselves. And often one particular reason for that can be is that we are not living our lives truthfully and honestly to ourselves. And it's not the big lies, it's the little lies happening all the time, as we try to conform with social expectations and try to fit in. Whichever society we're in, anywhere in the world, the same rules apply. There are social pressures to fit in. To some extent, we need to comply with these social pressures, like paying taxes and being polite to people in the street, and particularly when we're doing the job that we do in society. Whether we're working or not working, we need to be positive in our engagement, and in that respect we need to fit in. But there's also part of social norms in which we shouldn't fit in, and we should challenge the notion that we are expected to fit in. And a classic phrase in the British Isles is keeping up with the Joneses. You may have heard of it. The Joneses are a fictional family of aspiring, perfect people in the community who strive for more outward wealth, who like to show that outward wealth, and the people around them who are not quite as perfect and as well endowed in life as they are, then race and struggle to keep up with them. So that when you see someone who is going into debt, going around in a flashy car under the illusion that people worth impressing are going to be impressed, but in fact they impress the people who are not worth impressing, because their judgment is more shallow and superficial. But the Joneses carry on anyway, and everybody's encouraged to keep up with them, and it can lead to a poverty trap. The pursuit of wealth can result in a poverty trap where outwardly we seem to be doing well, we seem to be quote-unquote successful, but holistically, when we're being honest with ourselves, it's a different story, because we are trying to fit in, and that takes precedent and priority over fitting in with the evolution and formation of our own personal life, with our own personal values and applying our own judgment values to things. So you will find it is frequently a happier person who can buy a car, for example, and quite happily run it for 12, 14, 6, even 20 years. You can do that with cars. Rather than those who want to change their car on a regular basis because they want the latest model with the latest superficial trim because they're trying to impress people. The most important people that we can impress in life is impressing ourselves. And we can impress ourselves by, to a certain extent, not fitting in, and importantly, not feeling or acknowledging the pressure to do so beyond what is reasonable and decent. And this is where you find the non-conformists, the eccentrics, the original characters, the people who have practiced not fitting in and have gained personal experience of not fitting in. As a result, they stand out. Some of them, it can be quite negative. You can see the recluse who never washes, never cleans, shouts at children in the street, and occasionally gets arrested for defecating in pavements. They're not fitting in. However, by and large, the majority of people who don't fit in can frequently be very good conversationalists and provide very stimulating conversation, for the simple reason is that they're not living conventional lives, and as such their experiences tend to be less conventional, less ordinary, and more interesting. And it's not just the one-off experience, it's the experience of life happening all the time. So a well-rounded eccentric is a fascinating person. They may seem a little bit intimidating at first, but once you start to spend a little time observing them more closely and engage with them conversationally, you will find that they frequently have, for example, a political attitude, political thoughts, which are beyond, way beyond the superficiality found in tabloid newspapers, which of course are fictional scripts. And why not? Because the people who actually believe newspapers, if they're going to be thick, and if they're going to be daft, then so be it. It's natural law. So I'm not judging on it. But the eccentrics, they tend to be reading books rather than newspapers, and as such, they actually have a more rounded view of reality, not just the reality of the age in which we live, but the reality beyond the age in which we live. So this is where it's worth pursuing writers. Read books from writers who don't fit in. Writers like H.G. Wells, like, let me see now. I had a writer on the tip of my tongue. George Orwell, that's who I was thinking of. He didn't fit in, and therefore in his fictional writing, he was able to express a perspective that really applied to his own life, that is very illuminating and helpful to us. Thank goodness he wrote it down when he talks about the Big Brother state. He was absolutely right, and he came from a perspective and an environment in which he had insight which many people wouldn't have. And there are many writers in that position. I'm not even going to start naming them, but when you're watching YouTube videos, I recommend that you go down to the comments underneath, because you will find someone will leave a comment, excuse me, I've got to watch where I'm putting my feet here, I'm on a track. You will find that in a particularly interesting video on YouTube, people will leave a comment and they'll put reference to a book that they've read that's been very, very, very useful, illustrative, and an interesting read. Because the message in the book does not fit in. So we're not talking cookery books here. We're talking about people who have not fitted in, had unusual careers or lived unusual lives, and talk about it. And we can learn so much from them to become more confident in ourselves about not fitting in. And when we look in the mirror, we should never be ashamed of what we see. We should always look at the reflection in the mirror and say truthfully, do you know, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, because you are me, and we're both on a journey, And that journey is one of discovery and of enlightenment. It's part of the purpose of life. And as such, if we can practice on a regular basis, not quite fitting in and challenging the normals, the dogmas of the age in which we find ourselves, then eventually we will find that we're at a different place in life. It may take a few years, it may take a few decades, but what's the rush? And we find that we have grown up and grown into our own skin far more successfully than if we had tried slavishly to keep up with the Joneses. I'm Ralphie. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and reassure me, gainers, that you're not going to try and fit in. And I'll tell you why, because you want to stand out. That's why. Bye.